system in the country. We remained an active partner to the government of Nepal and the people of Nepal for many years over this era in the 1990s, when Nepal's private sector also joined the fray. And the rest is history. The details of the report for that, we have the two main authors with us today. But before I introduce them to you, I will say a few words. I will say that the example from around the world show us that digital technologies can promote efficiency and innovation. They can boost growth, improve services, and expand opportunities for everybody. For that to happen, strategies need to be much broader than information and communication technologies. To reap the greatest benefit for the audience, countries must create the right environment, regulations that facilitate competition and market entry, skills that enable workers to leverage the digital economy, and institutions that are accountable to the people. I want to steal in more thunder from the main authors, but I have the honor and the privilege to introduce them to you today. Here is a lead economist at the World Bank and the co-director of the 2016 report. He was previously the World Bank's lead economist for the East Asia and Pacific region, overseeing the work on the economic policy and management. The economist for Ethiopia, India, Pakistan, Sudan, leading the bank's policy and analytical work on economic issues in these countries. Kathmandu is also the co-director of the 2016 World Development Report. He is an economic geographer in the World Bank Development Research Group. And work has included issues of urban development, promoting regional growth, and impacts and change development. He was also a principal author of the 2009 World Development Report, which was entitled Reshaping Economic Geography, which I really enjoyed reading actually 2 years ago. Over to the co-directors, I would also like to thank our partner, YoungInnovations, for helping us connect with you today. So I wish you thank you, namaskar, and dhanyavad. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Kamata. And there's a slight change in plan. This Honorable Vice Chairperson of National Planning Commission, Dr. Yuvraj Satyawada, had to go to Parliament and is on his way. But rather than start with the presentation from the authors, so as Mr. Kamata has already introduced the authors, so I'm not invite come forward and deliver his presentation. Thank you. Good afternoon and namaste. And thank you all very much for giving us the opportunity to present the whole development report on digital. It's a real pleasure and a privilege to be here, and special thanks to YoungInnovations for hosting the event. The picture that you see on the screen behind me, which captures the very essence of the WDR. How rapidly digital revolution spread around the world, and people go to be part of it. This photo, taken on the coast of Horn of migrants from Somalia, crowding the night shows of the building. Why are they holding the cell phone into the air day in the internet was billions of emails, videos, online searches, and so on. Massive numbers, they're all in billions and millions. Amount of data, information, and some even say knowledge that are crossing borders seamlessly and costlessly. Has brought many immediate private benefits, easier communication, wideness of information, data, and new forms of leisure. In a slightly deeper question, what about the broader development? Faster growth, more jobs, better services, which is what we collectively refer to as digital evidence on demographics. So the idea is your role business and contribute to grow. Workers, what they're looking for, the government, the big another thing you see on the screen, the reports, when you go and download the report and look through it, every time you see a picture in orange or yellow, growth and so on and so forth. The report mentions many technologies, from feature phones to smartphones, from computers to clouds, and from sensors to satellites. But this report is not about technology, their impact. And to understand that, you'll have to meet some of the people and hear their stories as we did while writing. Meet Hongwei Meng, who owns a ranch in Shandong province in China. Animals on Alibaba's digital platform. His annual revenue is close to $50,000, a hefty increase from $200 monthly disability benefit that May used to get before. And he proudly says, "I'm not a disabled man, businessman." Alibaba has 8 million users. You can actually make households. They find a Silicon charity called Give Directly sent $1,000 unconditional cash transfers to several beneficiaries to a mobile money platform called M-Pesa. To identify poor and to send fiscal transfers compared to the way the World Bank does its business today or the government of Nepal does this business today. So Sirosa Akkad, the lady on the screen, a widow with 8 children, was one of the unexpected beneficiaries of this program. The revolution had bypassed people like her into poverty in a remote village, but not this time. And this wouldn't have been possible without digital technologies. Were once victims of human trafficking, condemned to a life of destitution in the southern Indian states of Chennai. Like this case, nearly 1 billion Indians have issued digital identification in the past 5 years. Possible for the government to provide vital services to poor and vulnerable groups. To Pakistan and Ethiopia to Singapore are also use of digital ID to improve service reduce fiscal waste. And this couldn't have been possible without digital technologies. Behind this compelling stories lies some very interesting economics. Economic literature to propose a simple framework for understanding how digital technology can promote development. This technology, by lowering the economic transaction costs of the social institutions, the the last 30 years. So you might say, what's really going on here? The report does not argue that these trends are because of digital technology, but it wonders why they're happening in spite of them. What are we really missing? Why are technologies spreading rapidly, but digital dividends have lagged behind? The first explanation is very obvious, that despite rapid technological expansion in many parts of the world, a significant digital divide persists. Out of 7.4 billion people in the world, 6 billion lack broadband, 4 billion people do not have access to internet, 2 billion people do not own a mobile phone, and more than 400 million people live outside any digital signal. Then, within each country, there is a digital access gap across gender, income, age, and geography. This picture is for Africa, but I'm sure if we had access to disaggregated data in Nepal, we would find the same things, that many of the people who have access to internet tend to be wealthier, tend to be men, tend to be living in urban areas. So there is a large unfinished agenda to make internet access universal and affordable. But even if we solve the access problem, the WDR argues that we are not going to realize the full digital dividends because technology is not neutral in its impact. Among those who have access, the benefits tend to flow disproportionately to the better off, more educated, and better connected, which is pretty expected, because that's how the economy, market economy tends to work. People who have endowments can take advantage of the technology that's available there. So in technical terms, digital technology are productivity bias, skills bias, and voice bias. So firms which are more productive tend to use technology better than the firms which are less productive. Governments which are already very accountable and honest tend to use technology more enthusiastically than the government which are less accountable to begin with. So if we do nothing about this, what we are going to see is a more amplification of the inequities that exist in the world rather than a declining inequities or elimination of those. So what the report argues is that there are factors beyond technology that shape the development outcomes. We call them the analog complements to digital development. Without those complements, the benefits will often fall short. So connectivity plus complements gives you these wonderful things for inclusion, efficiency, and innovation. But in the absence of those complements, we might risk leading to a concentrated markets where winner take all outcomes, a polarized labor market and rising inequality, and more state control rather than empowered citizens. So the question is, what are those complements and what to do about it? That's when I turn to Uwe.
Thank you very much, Deepak. So Deepak gave you a bit of an overview of what we see as the main benefits and advantages of the internet, and we all see those in our daily lives. But what the report is actually doing is sort of have a consistent framework in explaining where those benefits actually come from. So what I'll spend my next 10 minutes or so on is talk a little bit about the risks that are behind these indications of that the benefits are not flowing as widely as we expected. And also talk a little bit about both the policies that can be used to mitigate them, and what we call these complements, basically the factors that we think when they're absent actually cause these problems. So a good way to start on impact on businesses and firms. So the ICT sector itself is a very important part of the economy, but we have to remember that it's actually very small, even in advanced digital economies. It's usually not more than 4 to 5% in terms of contribution to GDP, and maybe 1 or 2% of the labor force. I think in Nepal it's a little bit less than 1% in the data that we have. So most of the growth in output and in jobs actually has to come from other sectors that use ICT. But what we see in the analysis in the report is that this is not happening, and it's certainly not happening at the speed and to the extent that we would have expected. And in the report, we identified 3 main problems in this area that are summarized in this very simple chart here. So on the left, the adoption of digital technologies by non-ICT businesses, especially small and medium-sized companies, has been very slow in developing countries. And we don't have the data for Nepal, but in India, for instance, only about 2 out of 5 companies in India even have an online presence, just a website, so it's very, very small. We think that one is in business environments that protect already dominant firms or vested interests. Now, in the center, where online and offline businesses compete, there's a huge uncertainty right now about how to regulate internet-based companies. So, for instance, is Uber, the ride-sharing company, is that a taxi company or is it a software firm? Is M-Pesa or other mobile money systems, are those a bank or are they a telecom? And these are actually problems that governments, even in the most advanced countries, are still struggling with. So from Paris to Beijing to Delhi to Sao Paulo, this is being hotly debated right now. And on the right, the economics of the internet actually favor natural monopolies due to the structure of the high investment costs but then very low marginal costs. And what we see is the emergence of dominant firms in many, many parts of the digital economy. So the Googles and the Facebooks that have grown very, very big in a very short time period. What we have to remember is, of course, that so far this has been very good for consumers. Consumers really have not been cursed by this concentration. But we also know from economic history that these types of companies, these dominant companies, sooner or later are very tempted to exploit their dominant position. So we have to really watch out there. And when we discuss this report in other parts of the world, for instance, we talk to the European Commission and the European Parliament and so on, a lot of the concern is actually on the right side of the chart. So it's the internet economy itself. But what we find in many lower income and middle income countries, the bigger issues to be concerned about is probably on the left side of the chart. It's really that these technologies are not being adopted to the extent that would be much more beneficial for growth in those countries, in these countries. So in summary, without good regulations, especially competition policies, that's our first complement, is good regulations that ensure that there's a level playing field for firms to connect and compete. So without these, we might actually see much less innovation than we had expected. And we may instead end up with greater concentration and with monopolies and with divergence between firms and countries that are slow to adopt the internet and others that have quickly come to dominate their markets. Now, the second risk relates to labor markets. This might be a little difficult to read, but all these charts are in the overview and, of course, online as well. So the internet complements skills and allows workers to be more productive and to find more rewarding opportunities and also gain higher wages. But it is also changing labor markets quite significantly. New forms of work tend to be more informal, and automation is destroying some jobs. So we've seen that in manufacturing, of course, and before that in agriculture, but this is now also happening in many service sector jobs, in middle-paying, white-collar occupations, for instance. While these changes are good for overall productivity, that's really how economies grow in the long run, they can, of course, be deeply disruptive to individuals. So one of the results is an increasing polarization of labor markets, which we see in developed countries, but as we show in the analysis in the report, we also see now in many developing countries. So in most of the countries in this figure, the share of middle-skilled, middle-paying occupations is falling, and those used to be very good jobs for people to make an income and to raise their living standards. So those kinds of jobs are not disappearing, but the share of them is declining. But the share of low-paying jobs is actually rising in a lot of other countries. So we don't have the data from Nepal, for instance, but if you look, for instance, India is, I think, on here, it's here. You see this trend as well, not as fast yet as in some other countries, but it's certainly happening. So what we think this is not all due to the internet, globalization and urbanization and such trends are also playing a part, but digital technologies are an important driver. And while we don't have this data for Nepal, what we do have is there have been some studies recently that looked at the basically which kinds of occupations could be automated just from a technological point of view over the next 10, 20, 30 years or so. And the numbers are quite staggering. Basically what we find is that across the world, a child that is in school today has probably only about a 50% probability of ending up in a job that exists today, because many of the other jobs will just go away. And even for Nepal, you see that just from a technological point of view, almost 80% of the jobs could be automated. And that's very high because many of the jobs that have already been automated in other parts of the world have not yet in Nepal. But even if you account for the lower wages and the technological implications of doing this automation, We think that about 40% of the jobs in Nepal over the next few decades might be at risk of automation. So even in countries like Nepal and so on, this is really something to be concerned about, not that this is happening overnight, but this will be happening over the next few decades. So as a result, what we think the biggest risk of the digital revolution is not massive unemployment, as many people fear, because historically we've always found new ways of keeping ourselves busy, but widening income inequality. And of course, the most important public policy response has to be to help people to gain the skills that technology complements, that makes them more productive, and not to teach the skills that technology will actually replace. So that has huge implications for education systems, skills development, and so on. So finally, there have been a large number of e-government initiatives. These initiatives have given us easier access to information and more efficient government procedures. We talk a lot in the report about the small country of Estonia in the Baltic in Europe that has probably gone further than any other country, but there are many other examples, Singapore, Korea, and in almost every country in the world you see pockets in government and so on that have deployed technology very effectively. But an extensive review of the evidence shows that in many countries, these investments often fail to address the two most difficult challenges to improve service delivery. So one is the accountability relationship between service providers, policymakers, and citizens, basically the ability for citizens to hold service providers and policymakers to account and demand and get better services. And in fact, some years back, there was an entire world development report written about this particular issue. And the second is the ability of citizens to organize and to participate in and influence public debates. It's basically the collective action problem that creates changes in policies. So the evidence compiled in the report suggests that initiatives that leverage technology to improve service delivery often fail, and it's often because policymakers and service providers are not sufficiently accountable and therefore lack a strong incentive to improve services. The technology often does not help basically make unwilling service providers more accountable, but if they're willing governments, if there's a strong incentive to improve, then technology can really make a difference. Now in the report, we compile a lot of available data to measure where countries stand on these two dimensions, basically with respect to digital technology endowments, how much businesses, people, and governments use the technology. So that's basically your y-axis here. And also with respect to these analog complements. Basically, in this chart, we use a very broad summary measure of the quality of regulation, skills, and institutions. And you can't see this chart very well, but it's in the overview and also in the main messages you can see. And we see that Nepal, it's a little bit difficult to see, is about where we would expect it, maybe a little bit stronger on the technology deployment, but lagging a little bit on the complements. And we can talk a little bit more about the details there. So this data set provides a simple diagnostic tool, we think, because you can break down the data by sector and so on. That gives us some idea of how to prioritize different policies for countries at different stages of digital development. Now we use this very broad typology in the final three chapters of the report, which are all about policies, basically what to do, where, and when. And we discuss implications for the ICT sector itself, policies to strengthen the analog complements that were identified in the first three chapters. And then we have a chapter that deals with issues that cross borders and require some form of global cooperation. So let me talk about these in turn. So first, ICT policies that ensure that everyone will get affordable internet access. And that gets us back to the cover photo and the riddle that Deepak posed in the beginning of the presentation. So that people who are holding up their mobile phones are migrants in Djibouti who strain to catch a signal from neighboring Somalia. And now Djibouti is one of the last countries that still has a telecom monopoly, and therefore very high prices, while Somalia, which is a much poorer and fragile country, it's many years of civil war, actually has a very vibrant telecom sector, with lots of competing providers. So in terms of supply side policies, we actually have a pretty good idea of what is required. Strong competition policies in the telecom sector, public-private partnerships, like Korea did very well, for instance, and effective telecom and internet market regulation, things like spectrum management, for instance. Make most of the ICT infrastructure investments, because there's usually no willing to pay for this. But public support will sometimes be justified by the strong social benefits from internet access. And there's some countries that have done that very effectively with relatively few resources, but at the margin have been able to spread internet and mobile phone access more. Now the challenge is much harder when it comes to demand side, or what we call second generation policies. They're very difficult questions about internet filtering and censorship, and how to ensure a level of personal privacy and cybersecurity that makes people feel safe when they're using the internet. And these are issues that even the most advanced digital economies are really struggling with. And maybe you can't see this very well, but the cartoon up here in the top is from the New Yorker magazine. It's one of their most reproduced cartoons from the mid-90s, when we were still very naive about the internet. And when this cartoon says, on the internet, nobody knows that you're a dog. And recently, The Economist magazine wrote in a very nice article, basically that now Google, Facebook, and you could add some governments probably as well, know very well that you're a dog, and they also know whether you have fleas and what kind of dog food you prefer. And this really sums up how this has changed how the corporations and also some of the governments are really collecting so much information about us, sometimes without us knowing about it. And this poses many questions about privacy and the possible exploitation of this data that we have not really resolved yet, that we're still struggling with how to deal with. Now, secondly, there are many practical steps that countries can take to strengthen these analog foundations or the analog complements, how to adapt regulations, skills, and institutions to the digital age at different stages of digital development. And Chapter 5 has lots of specific examples. I won't talk about the specific examples, but the basic idea is that in what we call emerging countries, where internet use is still very low, and the priority is to build the foundations, and mostly by making adoption easier. So many of the more complicated issues are probably less relevant than just getting everybody connected at first. Now, in transitioning countries where internet access and mobile phone access is actually already pretty high, it is to ensure that everyone is actually able to take advantage of these technologies. And then in what we call transforming countries, where internet use is very high, almost universal and so on, it is really to address these wicked problems that the internet itself creates, such as complex competition and antitrust issues, or deepening the government's digital engagement with citizens. Now, what we also argue in this chapter, or highlight, is that there are many ways in which these digital technologies in turn can actually help strengthen these analog complements. For example, through well-designed online education or monitoring service provider performance. So while the report argues that the internet is not a shortcut to development, it's not a substitute for many other policies, it can certainly be an accelerator. It can actually help strengthen these analog complements if they're deployed effectively and smartly. Now, the third and final policy chapter deals with global issues. So how to govern the global internet, which is a surprisingly controversial issue, but could have huge consequences on how the internet is organized in the future, how easy it is to ship data from one country to another, and how to remove barriers to a global or at least some regional digital markets, so like e-commerce across borders easier, for instance, which is a big issue even in the European Union, for instance, where many other border barriers have already been removed, but on the digital markets, there are still many barriers to better exchange. So one important aspect is also how institutions such as the World Bank itself and other development organizations can better leverage these technologies in their own work. So if the internet disrupts everything, should it not also disrupt the business of development? And even in the World Bank, we're only starting really to think about how we can use these technologies much more effectively for monitoring, evaluation, for knowledge sharing, for learning, to provide international or global public goods and so on. So there's a huge agenda, and we hope that the report will actually contribute to this vibrant debate between the development partners and the countries and so on, how to use these technologies more effectively. So in conclusion, the main message of the WDR is that digital development strategies need to be much broader than ICT strategies. So connectivity for all remains a hugely important role and also a tremendous challenge. But we think that countries need to be much more. So consider again the compelling examples that Deepak started out with that have important lessons actually for this. M-Pesa was able to roll out mobile money because of the rapid spread of cell phones and Kenya, the technology side, but also because regulators allowed it to compete directly with banks. And in countries where this has not been the case, we've seen mobile money not take off, actually. Alibaba's success builds on fast-rising internet coverage, but it is equally due to the many skilled entrepreneurs who are aided by a very supportive business environment, including very good logistics, for instance. And India's Aadhaar digital ID system relies on large databases and fast communication, but it cannot be an effective tool for service delivery to poor and disadvantaged people without accountable policymakers at all levels of government and service providers at all levels of government. So what the WDR 2016 proposes is that when these complements to digital investments are absent, the development impact of new technologies will often be disappointing. We see that in many, many examples. But when countries build strong analog foundations, they will harvest ample digital dividends, faster growth, more jobs, and better services. Thank you very much for your attention, and I look forward to a good discussion.
Thank you very much to the authors, Deepak and Uwe, for the wonderful presentation. And I think, for me, it was very interesting to see, like, how can I relate this context and the local policies and the kind of infrastructure challenges that we have, which is something that we're going to discuss in a while in our panel discussion. Before that, I would like to welcome Honorable Dr. Yuvraj Yoda, who is here with us now. And I would like him to come forward and place his remarks at this moment. Thank you very much. Over to you, Dr. Kathmandu.
Distinguished colleagues, first of all, let me congratulate Uwe for coming up with such a brilliant study report on digital dividends. I think no other topic could be better than this at this stage, when we all are talking about the strength and the risks associated with the digital developments throughout the world. I think I just listened a few presentations. They are self-explanatory on what are the opportunities and what are the challenges that lie ahead of us by using and making the best advantage from the digital dividends. I would just like to touch upon some of the issues that my country confronts on this digital dividend. Let me start with one fact that this is one of the areas where we are the most inclusive. The teledensity is crossing 100%. Internet connectivity is increasing by leaps and bounds, reaching more than 50%, and we are expecting it to cross 75–80% in no time, maybe next year. And if you compare it with the kind of other basic utilities that we have, the sanitary facilities, particularly the toilets, the drinking water facilities, and even the bank accounts. I think that the bank accounts are just half of the teledensity we already have. And that also gives an opportunity how we can make other services more inclusive with the use of this technology, because now we have the basic connectivity. And we have the task before us is to make the best use of this available technology for having had a more inclusive kind of development in other areas as well. I was visiting a couple of rural areas in my country, and I was just thinking of some of the smart and climate change resistant or adaptation related villages, to put it, particularly climate change adaptation villages, smart villages to call them. And I was looking at some of their activities and I was really impressed. At least the farmers can have some information on the weather for the next 3–4 days, which is so good. They can manage their cropping patterns, they can manage their harvesting, and they can manage their marketing based on the information they have, and it comes in their mobile, which is just linked to a small weather station run by the community, and that serves the community so well. Then you have You have the information on your products, the market information. You have also the information on how to use some of the pesticides or other kind of inputs. And you also know where you can get the extension services. And if you are smarter and known to external foreign languages, you can also get some technology transfer to the agricultural farmers level. Although we don't have much of the literacy, we don't have many people who can understand and read English websites, but some of us have tried also to make them in Nepali, and they are getting advantage of it. So I could see a transformation in agriculture taking place through this technology. I don't mean transformation only being people or activity moving from agriculture to industry to services. What I mean is intra-sectoral transformation, transformation within agriculture, from traditional to modern agriculture, from livelihood linked to business-oriented, specialized and efficient agriculture. And there I can see the role of this digital connectivity very strong. And I have already been in the mood that we should be really scaling those efforts to see that more farmers benefit from this technology. Because as I said, people are already connected, and this is one of the best service that we have in comparison to other sectors, other services in the country. In industry, colleagues would say that we have so much of problems in registering companies and also getting information, oftentimes not transparent, and making the cost of transaction so high. And this could really make much of our business less costly. It will reduce the transaction cost and increase the comparative and competitive advantage of our industrial sector. In services, I was listening to one of the last slides where the beneficiary of this digital infrastructure, I think the most benefiting sector has been the financial sector. It's totally globally integrated, and the transaction costs are getting so reduced. But still, we have not been able to get the most advantage of this. Also because the kind of e-banking or mobile banking or branchless banking that some of our banking institutions are carrying forward is yet to get momentum. The reason being that we have been a late starter in setting the regulations for them and having linkage to the sectors which provide this technology, including the telecom sectors, the telecom service providers, the vendors, and also the regulators being a bit behind the technology that's advancing. Other than financial services, I would be happy that this technology also provides better benefits to health and education services, which is so important in our country because the topography and the road connectivity and other kind of connectivities are still very poor. So when we don't have other kind of connectivity, and when you have teleconnectivity, perhaps you can better provide education and health services through this technology, and where I think we have to get the most benefit from the dividends that we already can have around us. Tourism. We are putting a lot of our efforts on marketing through our diplomatic missions, through the visits of the dignitaries and tourism personnel and many other people who are engaged in this. But the most powerful would be to put them in the proper website, and you can see the whole world looking into it. So easy and so less expensive. So the whole potential that the tourism industry in our country can benefit through this technology is still to be reaped in its fullest potential. That we have got or not. Take for example, the 103% teledensity. What are we doing with it? Are we linking it to our production, or are we simply wasting our time by overly engaging in social network, by overly engaging in chats, in overly engaging in unnecessary website browsing? Are we really linking all these things into our production process? Definitely not all. That has only created services for non-traded kind of services, whereby we import the technology. We have to hire the satellite, we have to hire the gateways, we have to import the equipments, instruments, and even the mobile sales, which comes into billions and billions of rupees. But have we been able to get even 10 or 15% of that in our exports? The tourism and merchandise trade exports, you can just see, it doesn't come even $1 billion. So it has implications in our economy at the moment, because we are spending a lot of such resources on non-tradables, creating a lot of imbalances and not linking them to our productive sectors. So the challenge to us is how to really make use of this technology to the productions, enhance productivity, raise our competitiveness, and then also promote our exports so that we can always balance our exports and imports in a better way. To macroeconomic management, myself being a student of macroeconomics, I cannot forget this point. The other is, as I saw in one of the slides, that job obsolescence, like you are embarking on a new technology and people are not readily being uplifted to new technology, and they lose their jobs, and they cannot be adjusted in other labor market activities. What do you do with them? We do have this problem coming up very fast. We are creating kind of high-end jobs for a few, but the large chunk of semi-skilled or unskilled labor force, which is mostly even illiterate. How to make them digitally literate, and how to better link them to the new labor market opportunities being created by the digital technology. This is a challenge to us, particularly in the public sector. We are far behind the technology. Private sector is more competitive, I would admit, and they can move faster because they have the flexibility or fungibility to make staff adjustments accordingly. They can readily hire and fire staff, or they can provide more incentives to some more adaptive kind of staff. But in government, it's not the case. So while we are trying to upgrade ourselves to e-governance, I can see a lot of human resource problems because we are just used to do the same old kind of technology and not being kind of challenging to the kind of technology that we have. So I think we have also to see how we can transform our public sector in the context of changing ICT and digital technology. The future challenges, as I say, first, this is a kind of global good. Being a global good, I would say there are global challenges and global risks, and we must also try to address them through global initiatives. A country cannot simply regulate everything unless it is a very, very big country with 1 billion plus population. Smaller countries, we don't have that capacity, or we don't even dare to do that. So if it is a global good, there should be a global governance mechanism to put in place so that anything related to the digital technology can be managed for better human lives. Because we have seen crimes, offenses, and riots being taken with the use of the existing technologies, and that often crosses border without our notice. So we have to be very careful on that. And also the kind of regulatory bodies that we have, and the bodies who make justice. Take for example, the courts. When there are digital crimes and digital offenses or frauds, there are not many people who really can understand it and make the judgment in a faster way. So we might have to develop our not only the regulation, but also the people who are capable enough to make judgments, and also to put people to justice when there are fraudulent cases. Finally, what we are doing, what Nepal is doing, we are in the verge of preparing our next 3-year plan. We have taken ICT as a good complement to what we can benefit from the digital dividend. The ICT infrastructure we are putting on a priority basis. First, a very competitive industry, and second, the public sector also making some investment into it. And then making ICT a very much cross-cutting issue across all sectors of the economy, ranging from agriculture to industry and to services and to governance. Particularly in governance, we are putting a lot of efforts on e-governance, and on that we have this governance reform program, in immediate action plan for governance reforms, where the use of ICT has been. And we have already seen that if we use this technology, we have not only better outcomes, but we have been able to just also cut down our unseen and I would say the kind of inflated costs that we see in our development activities. So these are some of the things we have been doing, and I would think that this report would be so useful to us to check up some of the critical points that the report has flagged on. I have just read the executive summary of the report. I have not been able to read the whole document, but if I get time, I will go through it and see what can be taken as the key interventions in our overall ICT policies and programs, including the infrastructure. Due to my some heavy occupation with the preparation of the budget, I missed the first few minutes, and I'll be again missing the subsequent sessions, but I hope you will be forgiving me on this. And let me thank you all for giving me this opportunity to come and to listen and to share some of my thoughts on this report, the theme of the report. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Dr. Kathiwara, for your wonderful remarks. And it's really nice to see that finally there's something in the policy that is talking about ICTs and the digital dividends. Hopefully, we'll have a lot more to achieve in the next future. So now, I would want to start with the panel discussion. And as I said, the objective of this panel discussion is to explore with Nepalese stakeholders the opportunities, the challenges, and perhaps go into further insight on information and communication technologies, infrastructure, and the digital dividends, and maybe touching base a little bit on the analog component that the report highlights about. So for that, we have a wonderful line of panelists today. So I'd like to welcome Mr. Manohar Bhattrai on the stage. Mr. Bhattrai has been one of the pioneers in ICT and governance scenario in Nepal. He's been a long-term advocate for advancing ICT sector and a big proponent of e-governance in Nepal for quite some time. He had been a former vice chairperson of the then high-level Commission for Information Technology in Nepal, and he has been taking key role in drafting the recent ICT policy of Nepal. So I'd like to welcome Mr. Bhattrai to the stage. Thank you. Yomari, and Yomari was a company that was founded back in 1997, where the access to internet was also not possible in many parts of the country. And he has now taken Yomari as an international company based providing this hardcore data mining services in the US. And we'd really love to see he sharing his journey and touching base on the digital dividends that we're talking about. Next, welcome Mr. for that. Next, we have Mr. Anandraj Khanal. He's the director of Nepal Telecommunication Authority and holds an extremely long experience in telecommunications. He's elected vice chairman of ITUD study group and is also the focal person of the country for World Summit Award for Nepal. And he comes with long-term, very long telecom policy law and regulation, and has been a very supportive regulator for the private sector. Up next, we have Mr. Binay Bohra, who founded Violent Communication back in 1999 and serves as its managing director. He's been advisor to South Asian Network Operators Group and has been an executive member on ICT Development Technology Committee for the FNCCI in the past. He was also the former president of Nepalese ISP Association of Nepal and is currently engaged with Violent on a full-time basis. Finally, we have Mr. Ajay Pradhananga, who represents the a hardware company based in Nepal and is really committed to converting his business into a world-class venture. He plays an active role in several business affinity community groups like the Young Entrepreneurs Forum, Entrepreneurs Organization, and FNCCI. He's also the co-founder of Himalayan Climate Initiative and is the member of board at the Grandi Hospital in Dhapasi, and is also involved with Nepal Pharmaceuticals Lab Private Limited. And he is also the board member of Enterprise of Business Accelerator Program in Nepal. So with this, I'd like to welcome all the panelists and would want to start the panel discussion. So can I we want to kind of keep this panel very informal, so there will be a lot of opportunities in between and after the panel discussion to take a lot of questions. And because one interesting thing that I see in this floor is this is quite a unique group where we have a lot of people from private sector, government sector, media, and civil society. So we don't want to miss out the knowledge that's there in the floor as well. So to start, I want to start with a few questions to each of the panelists and then organically take the discussion. To start with, I have a question for Mr. Manohar Bhattrai, who's been into regulation and drafting a lot of policies, has been a kind of ICT policy advocate for the country. Looking into the presentations and looking into the insight that Dr. Patiwar had earlier, so when we talk about policies, programs, and projects related to information and communication technology in Nepal, the way we have done in the past, have you ever thought about digital dividends? Or was it about getting infrastructure up to the mark and then think about dividends? What has been the practice in this context?
Okay, thank you very much. And first of all, before I even start, I would like to thank the World Bank and congratulate World Bank for coming up with this excellent report. There's so many things that I could relate to it immediately. For example, for someone who has been involved in developing Nepal's first e-government master plan, I can definitely relate to your assertion that this digital strategy must be complemented through some interventions in enhancing analog readiness. And I can relate to that 100% because before even I answer your question, I'd like to share my experience with the e-government initiative that we formulated and the pain points that we had experienced there. Of course, we had this excellent e-governance framework in place. So when it came to when the time came for its implementation, we could see that the level of bureaucratic and political will that was required to see through the effective implementation of this initiative was not there. And I can be very honest, very frank there. So I think in terms of institutional readiness, in terms of what we call analog complements, we are not there. So we ran through challenges when implementing this initiative. So now I think it's just beginning to gain some traction. Now for the policy part is, of course, I've been involved in the policy initiatives, starting from IT policy in 2000 and recently the ICT policy, whereby we tried to come up with a policy regime in tune with the emerging paradigm of convergence. And there we don't use the word digital dividends per se, but then again, the policy is more focused towards meetings on development outcomes rather than focusing only on supply side agenda. So there we talk about how we can leverage ICTs to generate favorable policy outcomes in the area of, say, education, health, and also in the area of stimulating the economic the policy in an indirect way when it touches upon the issue of the need to strengthen the regulatory framework to enable this effective implementation of digital interventions. And also when it talks about the need to strengthen institutional frameworks to successfully implement this policy impact. So to a certain extent, I think to a large extent, it talks about the outcome that we wish to generate from this the ICT policy. And that's to a certain extent is in departure from the first policy that we did in the year 2000, right? It basically talks about promoting connectivity and more on the supply side issues. And this one, I think it's trying to tie up more with the development policy outcomes, with the overall framework of the development agenda, and try to see where, as to how we can position SDGs to achieve those outcomes.
Thank you, Mr. Bhattrai. And I definitely have one question on that angle. Again, before moving on with another question, I'd like to move on to Mr. B. Because you've been, since 1999, you've been providing international research and have known a lot about the infrastructure challenges that we have. So what's your opinion in terms of, if you remember, like what Mr. Dr. Kathmandu earlier mentioned, like we're almost there to that 100. Is that the scenario? First question. And the second is like, as consumer of your infrastructure services, what can we expect next?
If you look at the Lonely Planet report on Nepal, they say that all the stats about Nepal you should take it with a pinch of salt. So apologies to the vice chairman, but I would disagree with the opinion that the stats that we've reached that level of connectivity on the internet. The meaningful broadband penetration today, sadly, is less than 10% in terms of subscriber base. Yes, more population is now using internet. There's more interaction there, but meaningful connection is 10%. So that is one area. So basically, still talking about plumbing. We're still talking about connectivity. Before even thinking about pausing and thinking about what benefit it brings, we're still struggling. We're still trying to break some barriers. You know, as the private sector, we face lots of things, and share that here. So for now, the most important thing is to take the connectivity throughout the country. That is the biggest challenge. Things are happening, it's positive, there's more connectivity, but still a lot to be done. There's potential because only 10% is problem on the having a meaningful problem right now. And on your second question about what we can expect. Of course, we have fixed broadband and we have a mobile broadband as well. So in future, I think the regulator is also here. We can also comment on that.
And we have problems.
Yeah, so used to that. And so 4G is what's going to be the next thing. And we would like to see reduction in rates for affordable internet to be there. So that is one other area. We're going to see a lot of disruptions in terms of how entertainment is going to be viewed. We've seen that ISPs are now going to launch IPTV as well, and it's going to be pervasive. It's going to go all through the country because IP travels, the bytes travel faster than traditional other methods. So I think a lot of transformations will happen. A lot of digital dividends will be coming. But as a service provider, we're still struggling with the basic number.
Thank you, Vinizia. I'm going to get back to that again. So I'd like to turn the table a different on the other side and would want to go to Ajay, who is not in the IT sector. Because earlier, I think the authors talked about skill set.
in using that technology, right? And what we've seen in Nepal, there is kind of reluctance from the sectors themselves to adopt new technology. Of course, we are very good followers, but when it comes to somebody saying that this is how I'm going to embrace on technology, like how do you see private sector investing into new technologies so that there's a demand for that and there are people to supply on that? What's your take on adoption of technology in relation with the skill set that you might have in your company or representing the private sector? How do you see that going in Nepal?
Thank you, Vibhushan. In terms of the adoption of technology in Nepal, except for the multinationals and the banking sector, if we take them out, the adoption is very, very low, as we all of us understand it. Generally, because of two things, what I perceive right now, this is my perception, individual perception. First is the skill set that we have as a company, because of the human resource capacity, the education of the human resources. We are not very adept to the new technologies that are coming up right now. In terms of, I'm talking about properly manufacturing base that I'm talking about, not into services, because I represent generally manufacturing base. And the second thing is the kind of apprehension that the entrepreneurs or the businessmen in the small and medium scale businesses that we are into, who are apprehensive because of the lack of transparency in the businesses or the environment that is prevalent in countries like ours today. And the other question that you mentioned, how is the private sector as a whole looking into it as an environment? The authors gave us a very interesting story about a small entrepreneur in China selling animal husbandry product in Alibaba. That's a very good example, which could be replicated in different countries, yes. But again, one of the authors mentioned that because of the logistical easiness, business environment, the conducive business environment, let's say the system which is supporting it, is it there in Nepal? There are a lot of internet, e-commerce sites in Nepal also. But generally when I look into it, I see very little Nepalese manufactured products there. What's the reason behind it? It's a very big question mark for us, and that probably is what the authors were saying about the 4-5% ICT sector that we're talking about, and probably the other side of the story, which is 95%, but we are not really competitive, or I'm putting a term of competitive here, because I think we are not really competitive in that sector, with even the basic systems and infrastructures involved. Please.
Yeah, thank you. Again, definitely I'm going to come back to it again with rather more specific question. But before that, I want to go to the PhD. Because you've been developing applications, like YoungInnovations has a long history in developing services for the government sector and also for the private sector. And earlier, if you remember, Dr. Kathmandu has mentioned that the adoption of technology, public sector is really, really a challenge, right? In that context, where do you see, as a software company, building on the infrastructure that we have now, and how do you see it going on? Like, where's the market? What do we create, or what's the plan? What are your plans in terms of harnessing this business?
I think there are two issues. When we look at the public sector and the private sector, as the President just mentioned, the issue is almost the same. Basically, we see a lot of opportunities because there are a lot of things to be done. That's the positive side. But at the other side, I think it's not only related to IT, because being from the digital economy, we always think that it's isolated in a different island where we can do everything separately. But at the end of the day, we are all interlinked. So it's not only issue of IT, because all the services, if you look at it, if you look at the transportation, if you look at utilities, everywhere is a challenge. So it's not only about IT. It's a general ecosystem that's there, which is challenging. And I think if we try to solve only the IT issues, we have been doing that for the last, I don't know, like maybe 25 years, talking about IT policies, talking about all those IT things, but then we are just repeating repeating the same cycle because we are trying to isolate IT from the general economy of the country, and which is not possible.
Yes, thank you, Dr. And my last question for the first round is to Anand, of course, and it is about the question that I asked you in person. I will be asking public. It's like innovation versus regulation. How is this cycle working in the market? There's a lot of time. We see a lot of startup representatives in the floor as well. It's like they come up with something, but they do not know whether that's legal or illegal. And there's a lot of gray area that we have to work on because of lack of policies, or maybe even because of lack of awareness on that. Right? So, as a regulator, because how do you see the kind of technology advancement and the kind of services that people think about? So regulation and innovation, how is it going together in these contexts?
Thank you for the question. The first thing that when this topic was digital dividend, in the telecommunication parlance, when we talk about digital dividend, we think of the analog broadcasting, converted into digital broadcasting, and we get some frequency spare for mobile broadband. I thought this report is talking about that kind of digital dividend. And then later on, when I went through the report, it's all about what ICT can make an influence in all the socio-economic development. And that's like note on it. When you're talking about innovation versus regulation, this is a very frequent question that regulation is more about controlling innovation. Sometimes when the resources are very limited and there is no very clear guidelines on the allocation and distribution of resources, regulation comes into picture and it takes a long time. But when resources are not utilized and it is just the interpretation of the existing policies or strategies or the rules, my stand is that if there is a gray area that really doesn't utilize the national resource and you can positively interpret the existing framework, you go ahead. And the regulator or the government is forced to make the regulation very clear to facilitate the development. But sometimes we have seen that the governments and the regulators are regressive. They don't allow innovation to take place even if the resources are not consumed, and they think that it is challenging the regime. So it depends on what is the mindset of the government and attitude of the regulator. Innovation. If there is a clear no, we should not innovate unless there is green signal. If there is a gray area and you don't consume any national resources, go for it, and the government will follow. For example, I remember there was no guidelines or regulatory framework on ATM machine. The bank started, and the Radisson Bank came with the framework for ATM and other. So even mobile money kind of things, there was no regulation in the Radisson Bank, but the bank started. So now they have created a separate department. They have created a licensing framework which is yet to be updated. So they didn't penalize for innovating. So most of the progressive regulators and the government don't penalize innovation when things can be done within the existing framework.
Right, and again, getting back to R&D, it's about like we're talking about the analog elements and also the digital dividends in terms of like why they have to need to talk about ICT infrastructure. So, and I remember like in the recent ICT policy, there is a mention of things like using technology to address issues of violence agreement, and there are so many social issues that has been addressed. And one question that I received from one of my friends was, is it only to make the policy look good, or is there a concrete action that you have even thought about, like how do you use such technology for some socio-economic growth and others? It's like from a policy perspective, it looks really good, but how do you see the implementation of those policies in reality in this context?
Yeah, I think I remember Manoj sir saying the same thing. He was talking about commitment from the bureaucracy and the government. There is a kind of when a policy is adopted by the government, it is the government who should have that kind of commitment to implement it. And I see that the governments are frequently changing and implementing a policy adopted by one government seems to be not a priority for the other government. And they don't talk much about the policies adopted by other governments. So I think this kind of problem exists until we treat ourselves as a nation. Government consistency on the government policy is very important. That is one big problem that I see in government.
I guess we can interpret it from different angles that we want to. Basically, we can innovate and this.
And another point here, when we brought ICT policy as the sector ministry and the sector regulator, after that, what happened? There are two ministries that are created. To look, one looks into IT, another into communications, and there are different ministers, different departments. That's this cross-cutting as it should be. It addresses all the development agenda, but one single ministry or the regulator cannot implement something that is designed for, say, Ministry of Health, Ministry of Education, Ministry of Social Welfare, something like that. Some national steering, for example, the National Planning Commission, they should own these kind of things and coordinate among other agencies who are looking into development.
Thank you, Anji. And now, one more question to Deepesh in terms of the way the software industry, because I'm trying to focus on software industry for people to understand that digital dividends cannot be lived out of internet itself. There has to be services, but there has to be sustainability of services. It's not sporadic emergence of those services. So, because I know that Yomari works a lot with different people who come with ideas and would want to build softwares to provide certain commercial and non-commercial services. What has been the aptitude of those ideators who want to use technology as a platform to create some value addition things to the society? So what has been their aptitude in terms of sustainability? Is it about getting excited and trying to do things, or are they really thinking about long-term sustainability of such products and services that can really make a difference?
I think most of the time when we we come up with new ideas, or when we interact with people who come up with new ideas, the sustainability issue is usually not discussed. But we always try to look for not very long vision, but at least it has to be sustainable to a certain extent. But coming back to a few of the things that we have been discussing here, what we have found is most of the time, sometimes it's infrastructure issue that has not made it complete, because we come up with e-commerce solution and there is certain issue. We come up with certain government e-services and everybody can do online, but at the end of the day, they have to come with the whole file to office to re-verify it. So there are security issues. So I think most of the services, most of the applications that are running currently in Nepal is never end-to-end solution. So it may be sometimes policy issue, it may be sometimes infrastructure issue, it may be sometimes logistic issues, but we have not been able to build a complete end-to-end solution. So I think that has been the challenge for the last couple of years, where we are trying to make it seamless, but sometimes it's policy, sometimes infrastructure, sometimes logistic.
Yes, thank you very much. I have a question for Inez in terms of, once I was talking with a friend about this modernization of office of company registrar, where everything is, you have to do it online, and somebody says I live in Umla, and the connectivity is not very good. So what does that mean? Right? And at the same time, I did some queries with friends working in the telecom sector, and they said a lot of people use their data in accessing pornography websites, even from those remote areas. Right? So how do you relate the uses of internet in terms of, because if we are to move from if we are to move to real digital, there has to be change in culture in terms of using services. Right? So how do you see the usage pattern of people in general in this context? If you compare that to urban setting and rural setting.
Yes, especially if you look at the rural setting, it's true that internet penetration in rural setting is not complete. Still a lot to be done there. But there are incentives for taking technology. For instance, when private companies, when they build their networks, they try to go to lucrative areas first. First, they want to have a business case. And then probably as a CSR or whatever, then they would go. Or a public company like Nepal Telecom would also work. But there are a lot of gaps. There are a lot of gaps and there are a lot of areas where internet hasn't been able to penetrate to that, to the poorest level, to the remotest level. It hasn't gone there. Yeah. But let me give you an example, because we were talking about policy. So in 2004, the policy came out, telecommunication policy came out, which says, telecommunication service will, whatever, if the national resources are not used, something that is not required, resource is not required, then that service can be free. In the sense, like international calls coming from outside, especially when migrant workers are going out, to call their home. It's not possible because what's happening is this kind of monopoly and status quo. That the regulator hasn't been strong, the government will hasn't been strong to liberalize that sector. So international long distance calls is domain of only very strong voice operators. ISPs cannot do. There's no interconnection possible. If let's say one portion of it was, let's say from abroad, they could use Facebook or any other Skype or whatever. And then here, there's no internet on the remote part, but there's more than 90% telephone penetration, right? Or mobile penetration. So there could have been an interconnection there. And the incentive for them to use the communication tools was low. So, those sort of policies need to be bold, they need to be stronger as to break those barriers of incumbency or the status quo. So there are a lot of examples like that. This is one very good example. I can remember, and I still today cannot interconnect voice calls. So that's, in this day and age, that's still going on. So that is one thing. The other thing you talk about, like pornography. Pornography in Nepal is actually banned. But it's not possible to ban things and get. There was to work things around. We do not have the resources, not the wherewithal to sort of control those kind of things. So we advocate open internet policy. We always, from our association, we also advocate openness. Give more opportunity for people to see wherever there's incentive for them to use whatever, and the technology will also follow. Sometimes technology comes first. You build and people will come later.
I think that was best pointed out the right issue about the competition, which I think the authors also highlighted, evident for analog complements of the ICT policies and things like. So one thing now, I will go back to Madhurji and ask one thing. It's been ages that we've been hearing about e-governance. And if we look into the trend of ICT adoption in other countries, it's governments in many cases which have adopted, and then suddenly you see a burst of services coming out from different settings. Right? So are we still on with this EGMP thing where it's like one thing for like that for 25 years, or do you see it being changed and adopting innovation at the ground level and then trying to adopt e-governance? What's the scenario?
Right. As I indicated earlier, I think we are beginning to see some traction there in terms of this e-government implementation of this e-government master plan. As I already shared with you already on this, we do have an e-government project that's currently being executed by the Office of the Prime Minister and Council of Ministers. So I think this project, as I indicated earlier, was running into some problems primarily because of, I stress it again, primarily because of the absence of what you call analog components. So complements. I think first and foremost, the political bureaucratic will that was required to bear upon this successful implementation of this initiative was not there. That was one thing. The other thing is that we let realize that the institution didn't have that kind of readiness to really see through the implementation of e-government the projects. So some of the what we found that out was that some of the institutions were more ready than others, if I can put it that way. So and there were variations in terms of institutional readiness in implementing this e-government initiative. Now, the current framework of e-governance is only the first phase of this e-government master plan, so it doesn't cover all the aspects. So it misses out on, for example, citizen-facing services, big time. So of course there are few citizen-facing services that are there, but then again it's more towards building a groundwork foundation, if you will, for other interventions to go into it. So now, as we speak, we are beginning to see some traction there, and there are some projects that are going ahead. But then again, it's going through problems, as far as I know. I'm not with the government right now, but then again, I think that it's going through many challenges as we speak. And one of the things that I've seen over the years, especially over past 2-3 years, is that the government bureaucracy, the government institutions are more receptive to ICT than they used to be before. So there are a couple of agencies that are more that have done fantastic job in terms of leveraging ICTs to provide services. For example, one example that really stands out, and that was the World Bank IFC support is Office of Company Registrar, and there they have been able to automate their services whereby you can register a company online, and the system has been very effective and very well received among the business community. So I think they have been interventions where we've really seen effective implementation of ICT. But in terms of real impact, in terms of generating digital dividends, if you will. Now, in terms of government transformation and all that, we still have to go a very long way. And I think my experience tells me that if we continue with the business as usual, whereby if we don't look at the overall ecosystem within which we are trying to situate these interventions, if we don't look at the things that needs to be done in terms of enhancing organizational readiness, and if we don't do anything on the regulatory front as to, for example, there are issues, there are interventions that were being planned in the financing sector, and in the absence of a robust regulatory framework, I think these initiatives have not received any traction. And going forward, I think the couple of, I think it's related to your question as well. There are a couple of initiatives, a couple of imperatives that we must commit ourselves to. One is, of course, enhancing connectivity, broadband. So both along access and affordability dimensions. For example, if we compare with broadband prices in the GNI per capita in Nepal, GNI per capita, I think we still have issues of affordability. We still have issues with expansion of meaningful broadband. If we take all of Nepal into account. So broadband is one area that needs to be, connectivity is one area that needs to be strengthened going forward. And the other thing is we need to drive innovation around ICTs, tailored to the specific problems that we face on the ground in Nepali context. So I think I don't see much innovation happening in that space. So there could be a mechanism whereby we need to promote innovation in this area, especially in e-commerce, e-government, and service delivery. And also regulatory and governance reform is another area because that we need to look into, especially competition policy, regulatory intervention, especially in the area of mobile banking, for example. And there's also this need for promoting skills and of what I call occupational capability among people, institutions, and all that. Not all institutions are ready to utilize this to derive that strategic advantage. So I think there's public issues in terms of institutions as well. And there's another big area that needs to be addressed is small and medium enterprises. And we have not seen much happening in that space, whereas they could leverage the ICTs to enhance the productivity and whatnot. And lastly, I think we should be focusing more on developing the ICT sector as a whole, as a growth sector as well. So I think these are all issues that we need to work on in conjunction with promoting going forward.
So I think now, like I would want to open the floor so that this can be more. Before that, one last question to us. You represent the non-ICT sector in this panel, and all these people are like from the ICT sector. And one, when you talk about digital dividends, I remember very well that we also talk about economic growth, right? And for that, we need ICT to be, having real value addition in the economic sector. So what is it that you need in the present context from the ICT actors, be it software companies, be it regulators, so that you can really see economic activities moving from the other side of the
This is a very challenging question for me. It's very difficult to answer also, but I'll try to invest in that, whatever limited knowledge I've got. What I see is the small medium enterprises in Nepal. We've got a very small sector right now. It's not huge. The capability is not as such. We are not really, let's say, we don't work as such with systems and processes in place. So people, we generally, as entrepreneurs, business managers, they don't know exactly what is needed for them themselves. Generally, that is one of the biggest issues that we have to admit. That's second thing is because of the scale, we are very small, and there are very few number of players in certain categories. What happens is when IT companies get into a developed software, let's say, it's really difficult for them to make software. I'm just giving you an example of the hospital that I represent. For the hospital software, generally you don't have too many softwares in place, very few. And that is only for payment bills, very specific things. If you really want to really integrate everything, we tried the best software available in Nepal, and we couldn't do it because the issue was there were very few players in the hospital segment who really wanted to have systems and processes in place. So what happens is, what I'm trying to tell you from my small experience is that this is actually again the competitiveness of all the sectors, including the economic scale, because we don't have that scale regularly. Again, coming back to the pharmaceutical sector, we tried having a software being developed. See, the pharmaceutical sector is very much regulated. So we have WHO GLP certification, a lot of documentation is done. So we wanted to get it into an ICT software, a software which makes the process efficient. That couldn't work because of two basic reasons. One, the software developer didn't understand the technical aspects first. The second thing, who used to run those softwares were the key pharmacists, the pharmacists of the company. They are probably one of the most educated, technically educated people, but they didn't know how to operate the software. I mean, that is the dilemma of the education in Nepal also. So basically, these are the things, and probably we have to start small with certain specific sectors, with certain sectors are doing well. I don't know, like right now, banking is doing quite well. So everybody is focusing on banking. That's a very good way to go for ICT sector. Probably later, I think there are a couple of marketing agencies, service marketing agencies, which are really doing quite well. I mean, that is another aspect where we can really get competitiveness and then move forward. Thank you.
And I think the authors would be very happy to hear what they said about the skill set thing that we need to focus on. So with that, I think, can we, if panelists agree with me, let's open the floor for 5 questions, and then we take the questions. So please make sure that your question is very, very specific and if possible directly to the
concerned person, and if not, then we'll ask share it among one of the panelists. So please state your name, your organization, your company that you represent, and then your questions directly. So we'll take 5 questions, and then get the response from the floor, and again open up the floor for another round. Can we have questions? Yes, one there.
Hi, this is Narayan. I represent Accountability Lab in Nepal. I forgot some of the business friends, colleagues from the panel mentioned about the values of transparency and accountability. Do you really see there is a business value, there is an incentive, having a business with integrity and business with accountability and transparency? Thank you.
Thank you, Narayan. Do you have anyone with further questions?
I'm Labakafi from DOA. About our regulation and policy in allowing us to opening new business, I think the government and our rules are honestly that does not promote any innovation or motivation. I have to go to different places. Why? The government should know me. The government should recognize me and this contest citizen. Why should I go to different places and register myself and show my face? Thank you.
Thank you for the question.
Thank you. I am Arun from FNCCI. I'm an active user of internet myself because I have to use for myself to seek resources, information. So what I found in government and the websites, most of them they look good, but when you dig down deep, the informations are not updated, and you find some files missing and so kind of things. So my focus is in content because I'd like to bring this topic of content. Because why we go there? Because without content is there, and without the content is serving us and the users, and why we go there? Also, I like the social media is a new thing happening, and there is the energy, a lot of energy spent in social media. So when the users are using something, why not the entrepreneurs and government also use that? And that will give you that will make the users or the planners bring the users into the area of productivity. Because most of the times when you go into social media, most of them are what they are doing, they are enjoying, they are entertaining. Though entertainment itself is a industry and there are money involved and economy, but how we bring these users to the productive side so that will generate economy and GDP and bring it to the mainstream analog economy. So these are the questions that arose while I was watching this. So my focus again is content and what kind of content we are generating, and there is any reliable content is there, and what are our planners are thinking about that, how to make all these reliable and meaningful contents and make them accessible through various technologies. So that is my main question. Thank you.
So that's the first question I can ask. And
yeah, thank you. My name is Paul Reitman, Phoenix Consulting and Training based here in Nepal. My big question revolves around, well, first let me say, I read the report that the World Bank folks actually understood it. I have an IT background. And so that was great reading the World Bank report and fully understanding it. I'm more interested in the convergence of big data and the Internet of Things and how that would produce digital dividends. But considering Nepal's state of affairs, and especially not even registering on the Open Data Barometer, what is being planned and what is being done in that regard, as far as using big data to solve some of the big problems like food, water, health, which it seems like in the developed countries, they are receiving the benefits from that. Whereas in the underdeveloped countries, we're not receiving much benefit from that, and the forecast doesn't look too good. Thank you.
Can we have one last question before we go back?
My name is Dipesh. I'm here from Robotics Association of Nepal. My question is more focused for e-governance system that we are currently working on. I think ethical hacking, the new terminology should be introduced, and I want to ask, will the policy on cybercrime will be enough for the hacking or ethical hacking that's going on for, because as the critical data is being updated on the websites and our servers, that might be going on the wrong hands of hackers. So will the cybercrime policy incorporate all these crimes, or will there be something extra policies on ethical hacking and all those things? Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to stop taking questions right now. So let's get it back from the panelists. Okay, one question that Paul answered earlier, the convergence of big data and IoT, and that actually contributing to reap the benefits of digital dividends. I want to go with Anandji first. What's your take on that?
I think the convergence has happened in terms of implementation. We have been focusing on convergence happening in the legal policy and institutional framework. But in terms of devices, in terms of infrastructure, in terms of services, it's already there. Digital dividend in the big data and IoT. Yes, these are the current issues that we hear about. Big data, some of the private companies are trying to promote, and it's happening. But IoT, we are talking about the smart cities. We're talking about many smart things. So it's slowly being sensitized. And we have put these things in the ICT policy when we framed it. But in terms of implementation from the government level, it has not yet happened. But from the private sector, it is happening because it's a global phenomenon, and Nepal cannot be outside this phenomenon. Thank you. I also answered the question from Dipesh on the e-government and ethical hacking, cybercrime. So we don't yet have a national cyber security strategy, but I am very happy to let you know that we have a memorandum of understanding with the International Telecommunication Union. The team is coming in the first week of July, and they will give us a national cyber security strategy and a framework for national cyber law, and also the institution that will implement both with awareness framework. I think these are the questions which I can. And regarding Robert Affleck's questions on state recognizing an individual and people not going into so many organizations, I think I remember one time the government was promoting one window policy for doing everything, but it's not yet happened. I can't say much about this.
Okay, so about what the question that Naranji asked, transparency and accountability, and perhaps using technology as an infrastructure, is there a business value to it? Can you actually provide services that make institutions, individuals transparent and also get benefit on business value? So I don't know, would DPC would be interested to take up, or maybe Azim start with. You can start and
Thank you, Naraji. This is a very interesting question, and I put up that as a question myself when I said the implementation of the ICT in businesses is because one of the factors is lack of transparency. Now, how do you incentivize it? Generally, the regulators right now, the facilitators, government is, in the last few years, they have started incentivizing it for being more transparent, probably in different ways right now. Most of us can see that. And the path towards transparency is very clear for everybody. But because of the history, the legacy that as we carry on, people do not think it is really, I mean, when I'm talking about it, I'm talking purely from what small and medium businesses think. I'm not talking as an individual. So what they think is that's not enough incentive to be transparent enough. I mean, that is not ethical for sure when I'm talking like this. But because the society represents it, if today, in today's term, in a developed country, if any of the company talks like this, that company doesn't have any future. But is the society that includes all of us? Is the society really talking in that term? We should start talking in that term first. And I suppose all the sectors are reflective of the society. And that is how things will move. And my small perspective is, the institutions are moving towards transparency, people are moving towards transparency because of two things. One, the society is moving towards incentivizing transparency, ethical behavior, and second, even the regulators and facilitators are going into it, like the OCR process also. That's a very, very nice thing to have. Thank
you. Although I'm from IT sector, I want to look at it holistically. So, is there an incentive for that? So, if you look at the businesses that has flourished in Nepal, I think the only industry that has actually flourished as a sector which has been very transparent. If you look at financial sector, it's at this stage because it's so transparent. So, if you look at manufacturing, the companies that has been multinational who has come to Nepal and invested and has been very transparent, has progressed so much, like companies like Unilever, companies like Dabur, and look at the other industries, like same kind of industry which are not transparent. So in a bigger picture, there is incentive to escalate, to make big growth, to grow very big. But in terms of small tools or small policy changes, I've been involved in Nepal when ABD had funded, and when it was the stock was being traded in the board, and I was fortunate enough to be part of that and see where the market is. You cannot although you may say there are certain other non-disclosable things, but it's, I think, because of technology, you cannot manipulate it. So it's the market rate at the end of the day. If people want to gamble or if people want to escalate the price, that's their problem. But in terms of manipulating the market, you cannot do it. So even I've also been fortunate enough to be company registrars this automation process, and it has, I think, from last year, it took us almost 5 years to implement because of policy, because of infrastructure. But now every company needs to upload their financials every year. And for there were companies who had not done it for 30 years, 35 years, and now all of a sudden, from this last year, it's all updated. So I think if you look at big picture, I think these kind of efforts definitely, I think, will make more open society, more competitive businesses, and at the end, I think everyone will benefit.
Yeah, the gentleman from the FNCC asked about the adoption of social media. One very famous thinker in Silicon Valley once famously commented that we were promised flying cars, but all we got was 140 characters. So obviously it's talking about Twitter, but that's not totally true, because I know even in our organizations now, one of the major engagement points with customers is through Twitter or especially Facebook. So these platforms that have come up have become very valuable in terms of getting the message across, trying to get information. So that interface between the two, which now has now sort of that barrier has been broken because the social media platforms have been used. And people are, or the businesses are now taking up that quite serious. And in this day and age when, you know, you could have all the fancy marketing and whatever to promote your business, but you get found out when you use social media. That's where the real feedback is going from. So we all understand the value and the power of it, and we try to design our reporting around that social media platform. So yes, it's encouraging. We see that a lot of people use it. People who are more technologically savvy, everybody's using Facebook to get the message across, to find information. So that's the point.
Yeah, I think all the questions has been answered. So before moving on to another question, I would also request the floor to shoot your questions to the authors, Deepak and Uwe, if there are any that is related to the presentation that they might have done. So if it is to the authors, please say that it is to the authors. And I would also like to request Deepak and Uwe to right there in the back. Maybe we can squeeze a little bit. That's how it works. Yes, we have a question from there.
I was just waiting for this moment for you to open the floor for the authors because I have a question for the authors. My name is Sudham Sudhal and I come from Kathmandu University. Obviously, this digital dividends, like it's been attached with its analog complements, which is very important. Yeah, that I just went through the executive summary report. I haven't got the time yet to read the full report. But I have a very obvious question, like this, I think the idea of this digital dividends resides on this openness, as post-millennial idea of opening up, like societies. And it also involves us, like in small countries like Nepal. My question is, how do we balance the regulation on the one hand, and on the other hand, the issues of internet freedom, the technology freedom, etc. Thank you.
Can we actually take a few questions from the floor and then respond? So it would be both the authors and the panelists, right? So it's not only for authors. We have one question. Can we pass on the mic to the lady in the front there?
Hello. Can I take the call?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Vibhushan. This is me, Hepal Shrestha, and I have few, if I would say, if the authors can share some learnings, the dividends you can draw if the investment is right. Where is the things this investment needs to be done right? Like we have lots of learning in case of Nepal, like where the investment might not have gone into the right pockets, right sectors for drawing the digital dividends. So just in learning from the entire expedition of the authoring this WDR, what were some of the wrongs and where we can relate and maybe where the right investment can be put in coming 3 years, 5 years, as National Planning Commission Dr. Yuvraj Patel was saying in the earlier session. So just some learnings to share from this point.
Third question. And the Krishnaji would be fourth. Can you
Hello, good afternoon everyone. My name is Bhavana Bhatta. I am from NGO Federation of Nepal. Thank you so much for the discussion. My question is to Manohar sir. Like you have been engaging in policy formulation and also supporting for the ICT Act or ICT policies nowadays also. I'm also from the law background, so I would like to know how friendly, like ICT policies are for the human resource, like who are working in public services, because my friend who are working in public services since 2000, but they don't have like competitive skill on ICT. This is challenging. Like Yuvraj sir also mentioned that the transformation is only being done within the sector, but the transformation is not. It is needed to be done intersectoral. So first question is how staffs, human resources will be self landing who has not competitive skill in ICT. How policies are talking about human resources, number one. Number two is that it is important to have an intersectoral transformation. So how other companies like Nepal, and other companies are supporting, to achieve the goal, to achieve the intersectoral, like health, education. There are lots of basic needs to be fulfilled. Like how other companies are also contributing. So the two questions, one for Manohar sir, one for Uttam.
Yes, I think this will be the last question because we promised to wrap up by 2:55 and we only have 4 minutes.
Yeah, this is Krishna Sapkoda from Freedom Forum, and our organization is working for right to information in Nepal, and I would like to relate my question to the right to information sector. Of course, actually, we are facing lots of hassles in requesting information in Nepal, though the Right to Information Act is there. What will be the implication if there is the digital dividends that will be associated to the information request, like requesting information through SMS, through email, through Facebook, Twitter, or something like that? Because it is actually it is being practiced in India and other countries. So of course, if the digitalization of right to information is in place, of course the dividends will grow. And my question is to the first, the panels and authors as well. Yes.
Yes, thank you, Mr. P. So can we now start with the response from the panelists first? Okay, normally Uber and we never divide. I think we always run the report together so we can substitute each other in the question. So let me just start by on the internet regulation story. So in the report we started with 2 codes about 2 world views about how internet should be regulated. So there's an American scientist and the internet pioneer called David Clark. So he said that in internet we reject kings, president, and voting. We believe in rough consensus and running codes, which basically means that internet is going to remain for everybody and to be open, and it will be largely maintained as a global public good. There's another code which actually got deleted, some mild censorship that happened while writing the report. It came from one of the country, ICT minister from the country, who wants to have more control on the internet, and that minister said that in 16th, 17th, 18th century, when it came to maritime, it was open, but eventually maritime became controlled. Each country had its own maritime zone. Similarly, airlines, sky was open to everybody, but eventually they all became national, part of national grid. And so is the case with internet. Very soon we will get to see that internet will not be covered internationally, but should be covered ideally by national authorities. And this is a minister from a very powerful country. But so we couldn't have that. But this is to balance out the fact that there are really 2 visions about how internet is going to be covered, and there is no consensus at this point. I looked at our data and I found that in about 2 years ago in Dubai, when they had this voting about how the internet should be governed, One view was a multilateral view, which is basically just the way the World Bank is governed. So you have all the government representatives sitting on the board, and they will consult with the private sector, but the government agencies will be voting on how the internet should be governed. And the current model, which is called multi-stakeholder model, where you have largely private sector as capability, a little bit more dominated by American companies, but also includes others. So there's a debate about which is the ideal way to govern. And when the voting was done in Dubai about 3 years ago, I just saw that Nepal voted for a multilateral model, which is the kind of the ones where many of the more dictatorial regimes want to support. Whereas the countries in South Asia, India and Bangladesh, and in Asia it was Philippines, and in Africa it was Kenya. So countries which are a little bit more progressive on the ICT side actually voted with Europe and America. And if the world was completely split, so I'm just curious to see, given all the ICT captains of the country, are they even aware about the fact that their government actually voted against kind of more freedom on the internet and all that? So there is a huge debate on the, and I think a lot of it is not well informed, but there's also a view among some people which is legitimate that if ICT is the infrastructure or internet is the infrastructure of the 21st century, then shouldn't we have a say? And the current model is clearly a lot more dominated by the Americans, and eventually there's a feeling that Americans have to give away their say, and it will be much more multi-stakeholder, and that's underway. But I really think that there should be better discussion in the country to see how Nepal should be voting in this kind of fora, because I think there is a lot of information here. There's a question about why ICT projects fail. And we find that this is a shocking statistic. Nearly 70% of the ICT projects, most in the government sector, fail to meet its initial objective. So it's not just the case, so everywhere else it happens. There's massive cost overrun, time overrun, and often they don't meet the final goal. And we think there are 3 reasons this happens. The first is, if you go into many countries and look at who are the champions of ICT in the government, it will be often the Minister of Interiors, Home Affairs, and all, who are not about development, they're more about control. So clearly they are targeting for a different kind of objective. So that's one. Secondly, we often tend to use ICT more indiscriminately. So every sector should put some money on ICT. In the report, we spend actually a lot of time thinking about this particular way. I urge you to take a look into. So we actually categorize, at least in the government side, which sectors are more amenable to automation and which are less amenable to automation, where you need more complements, where you need less complements, and accordingly you can actually prioritize it. So sectors which are most citizen-facing, sectors where the tasks are more routinized, and sectors which can be more monitorable and attributed are the sectors or tasks which should be automated. So things like pension, or monthly pension, or driver license. There's a much higher likelihood of success if you automate that process, rather than if you spend too much time in education or healthcare, where there's only a small part that will be automated, the rest needs to have a human doing the task. And the final reason why some of this fail is because there's a global fact. So, everybody talks about it, and the ICT ministers or the education minister heard somewhere else. They say, let's do it. So one of the examples is this one laptop per child. It's a program that started in Uruguay. It's very, it's pushed by a lot of very powerful people and companies, and we do see that many countries have started doing this. I was in India, where in the next election, many of the chief ministers have basically promised that this is a freebie to all citizens, free laptops, free to students. And we find that many of those things actually do not lead to learning outcomes. There are a lot of positive benefits of giving laptops, which could be about social empowerment and inclusion, but not necessarily learning outcomes, because they do not come with those compliments about whether the teacher has the ability to use it, are they being into your curriculum, and all sorts of things. So if you are giving a laptop, which is a good idea, then at least make sure that a lot of these compliments you are also investing in them to get the full use of the ICT technology. Thank you.
Maybe just to add, so what Deepak was talking about in terms of the openness issues is really at the global level. So how the internet as a global public good essentially should be managed. And this is really a very critical issue that might affect us all. I mean, some people have said if governments get too much control without a counterbalance from civil society and from the private sector and so on, we may actually end up with somebody called a split net. So instead of one global internet where information can flow freely, there might actually be far more barriers to information exchange than before. But the other aspect of this question, of course, is at the national level. And we see that practically every country in the world has some kind of censorship in place. And often this is censorship. It might be pornography, it might be in my own country of Germany, hate speech. Certain types of hate speech are essentially banned, and so you can't promote certain extreme political views on the internet for historical reasons and so on. And what we argue in the report is that when these restrictions are put in place by an accountable government, they usually reflect a very broad social consensus. And you might always argue whether the restrictions are right or wrong, but there's some kind of process that keeps this censorship in check. But when these checks and balances are not in place, then it can have very significant costs. And so one is the cost of censorship itself. I mean, if you look at the countries that do this at a large scale, it's still a very labor-intensive process of checking social media sites and so on. So those are all resources that could be deployed better somewhere else. But then there are other costs. I mean, there might be cut off from, if a country, for instance, does not let Google into their country and so on, you're cut off from things like Google Scholar, which is extremely useful. But the most important cost is probably that for an innovative society, and then sooner or later we all have to become much more knowledge-intensive societies, and open debate and open discussion, even if you don't like it sometimes and so on, is really critical for an innovative society. And I think countries that overdo this censorship and do it in areas that could really hurt the future economic prospects of the country. So there's a little box in the overview that you may want to read that is dealing with these issues. And it's called Nailing Jello to the Wall, because there was a famous quote by Bill Clinton who said, trying to control the internet is like nailing Jello to the wall. And of course, we now know that several countries have found very effective ways of nailing Jello to the wall of controlling the internet. And just very quickly on the other question, Deepak already answered very well, but there was this question, what are the right investments, what are the wrong investments? And I think, the right investment certainly is basic connectivity. I mean, there's no question that we should extend the internet and those kinds of technologies to everyone as quickly as possible. And then the right investment is also in these complements. Basically, the internet is great if you have it, but to really effectively use it, you have to be able to read and write, and you have to have certain basic skills and basic infrastructure to really take advantage of it. And when we think of wrong investments, and that's often when these failures come, is often when the technology might be there, but it's sort of scaled up in the absence of complements. And a good example that Deepak already gave is laptops in schools. If you have teachers who are not even in command of the material that are teaching, that they're supposed to teach, or if they don't show up in school and so on, any amount of technology will not really make a difference. And those investments are then often wasted. And that's what we see, and that's reflected in the often dismal performance of e-government and other digital initiatives.
So I think with that, if panelists have some last comments. 30 seconds.
Yeah, I think the regulation versus the freedom, as already mentioned, I was part of the delegation of Nepalese team. That was a very interesting episode. It was the developed countries versus the developing countries, and more illiberal kind of developing countries where that kind of freedom was not accepted. And finally, that's never implemented. Even though the final act was approved by majority vote, it has not been implemented because the developed countries have not accepted it. So that doesn't make much sense on international telecom regulation. So regarding the right to information and digital dividend, that's a very interesting question. What we should understand is it's not about the medium through which we can ask information from government agencies. It's the attitude of the government agencies who provide information. if the attitude is right, it can be done through any kind of digital media. So you can talk to the Information Commission and mandate the agencies to provide information through digital media, and so you can reap the benefits of digital dividend. I think regarding the policies, though, addressed to Manohar sir, in ICT policy, we have categorically mentioned that human resource is a key component of our policy thrust when we devised ICT policy. And you might be knowing that the Public Service Commission mandates this digital skills as a prerequisite for entering into government agencies now. And the intersectoral transformation, yes, there are a lot of ministries involved. We have a steering committee where a number of the secretaries from different ministries are part of it. And that's the respective ministry's jurisdiction. For example, in terms of health, so bringing e-health or mobile health program is the mandate of the Ministry of Health. Similarly, e-learning, e-education kind of things is the mandate of the Ministry of Education. Thank you. Thank you for answering my question. I'm Judith. And again, if I understood the question correctly, your question was whether there's some provision in the ICT policy that is addressed to the ones who are left out of this digital revolution, if you will, and we don't have the appropriate skills. No? Yes, as Anandji mentioned, there's a provision there whereby the policy commits itself to expand digital literacy and also ICT capacity building in institutions. So there's a provision there. But then again, about the policy, I must mention it here that policy to me is not is anything but is an expression of intent, if you will. No. So it will stay that way if you don't implement them. It's only the expression of intent. So it has to be backed by an action framework or action plan. I think government needs to work on that. But then again, in terms of policy provision, yes, there are provisions whereby this training component, there's a human resource development component, capacity development component in both public institutions, and social institutions like NGOs and all that. So it's all covered there. But then again, in terms of a concrete implementation framework, that I think still needs to be worked on.
Yeah. On the open internet thing, as internet has become more mainstream, more popular, more people using it, we've seen government also getting more nervous about, okay, this thing could be troublesome. Sometimes it's for the right reasons, like we've got riots, we've got disharmony, and all that. But sometimes it's about control. So, and we've seen that in Nepal. Because since we are kind of the conduit between information, content, and the users, we also sometimes face problems with the government because they sometimes try to blame the ISPs for some of the content. And there are controversial ways of taking down those information. Who is responsible for taking down those information? So those are the kind of things that's happening now. But one failure is internet is becoming popular. Internet is more widespread, it's pervasive. So for government also to do anything that sort of curtails these rights on internet is now difficult. So the idea is to make internet more popular, more pervasive. You know, you bring all those drones or your balloons or whatever you have. You know, we need to adopt all that. But as a private ISP, maybe I may lose something. You know, when all those balloons. But for the betterment of our society and for keeping it open, I think that is what we need to make it more popular, so that government cannot do all this.
Not then, I know that we're running a bit late. So just a reminder once again that we have not handed over a physical book, right? So please visit the website and download the e-version of the book, right? And in the website, you could also see a lot of other information like infographics, you know, different boxes and different facts that might be of interest to you. And we're saving trees, I guess, by not handing over paper books. So with that, I'd like to thank all the panelists, the authors, the speakers from the World Bank, including the country manager,
for a wonderful deliberation. And special thanks goes to all the invitees who are here, even if it's on Friday. And I think this is not an end. We want to continue this discussion. Let's catch over some refreshment and some food outside and continue the discussion. Thank you very much.
Your laptop off.